Now let's say we want to use these lists to represent vectors, right, in a three-dimensional space here. But the problem with this is that let's say we want to add the two vectors together. What will happen if we do list1 plus list2? Right, so we're going to get concatenation here. So this is not going to sum 1 and 4 and 2 and 5 and 3 and 6. And I see that question. I'll get to you in a second. We're actually going to get concatenation here. So it's going to paste the two together. But that's not the behavior we want if we're trying to sum two vectors, right? So if we have two vectors, we have x1, x2, y1 and z1. And we want to add that with x2, y2 and z2. We're going to want to get x1 plus x2, y1 plus y2, and z1 plus z2, right? That is what we should get. So we want to get this kind of pointwise summation here, not this concatenation that is by default what you get when you sum two lists together. So do class names need to be capitalized is a question that was asked in the chat. The technical answer is no. The correct response, or the thing that I want you to do is yes. So by convention, class names are capitalized. The first letter is capitalized. So when you're defining a class on your own, you will want to capitalize the first letter of that variable. Similarly, when you're giving variable names to other objects when you're coding, you do not want those to have capital letters as their first letter, because that will indicate to most programmers that this is supposed to be a class object, which is, if it's not a class, then you don't want to give that impression. So it's important that you follow these conventions so that it's easier to work with you, either in the industry or wherever you are working. So follow these conventions. They're there for a reason, to make everyone's lives easier. So let's continue with this. So we have this problem here where we want to represent this vector object, and the issue we're having is that the base data type list is not sufficient, or the operations do not adhere to the operations that we want to perform. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a vector object, and that vector object is going to have the behavior that we expect when we're adding vectors together, when we're multiplying vectors together, when we want to print out a vector, things like that. So let's go over the first step here, which is to define the class here. So we use the class keyword, which is class, and then we give our class a name. In this case, it's going to be vector with a capital V. And then we have parentheses, just like when we're defining a function, except within this is not going to be an argument. What it's going to be is this represents what this class is inheriting from. And inheritance is a concept that we're going to go over later in this lecture, but it's essentially how you would expect inheritance to work in a biological sense. So, for example, if you have a baby giraffe, and the baby giraffe has a father giraffe or mother giraffe, the father and mother giraffe have a long neck, so the baby giraffe will also have a long neck because it is descended from that giraffe family. Okay, so what's going on here is that we're able to take a class that already exists and then build upon it or change it. But by default, that class that we've created, the new class, will inherit all the functions and attributes that belong to the parent class. So that's something that's called inheritance, and something that is very, very important, and is another thing that makes our lives easier, so that we don't have to rewrite every function that belongs to a class. It can be inherited by default, and then we can change only the pieces that we want to change. Okay? So I just want to point out, by the way, that when we talk about functions in a class, which is what we're going to be defining within this class block here, those functions are now called methods. So a function that belongs to an object specifically is called a method. It's still a function, but it's a special kind of function, and it only belongs to that one class of objects. So, for example, we have in the string class. So if we've used the string class before, we have a method called split, right? So, for example, if I have the hello world here, and I do dot split, this is dot split. This is me calling the split method on the string hello world. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the string on the space character. And what I will get back is a list that is the string split by the delimiter, which is a single space. This is actually what the default splitting character is, so we actually don't have to specify it there. But this is a string class. This is a string method.